Live from downtown The Hague in the Netherlands, this is Willem Post in the International Press Center Nieuwspoort, home of the freedom of the press. So the perfect place for our election night in cooperation with the United States Embassy in the Netherlands. And a special welcome to Chargé d'Affaires Marja Verloop and of course our other guest speakers. Later in the evening we will also make a connection with Ambassador Hoekstra, who is in Michigan at the moment. Of course, also a warm welcome to our online audience, spread out all over the world, most of them I think in Europe and the Netherlands. We wish, of course, that we could have hosted all of you in person, but this is hopefully the best alternative. Politics is also fun. This special election day, we also thought it's a good idea to organize some sort of a quiz. And before I start the program, I have received strict instructions from our organizing staff to tell you that we also will have a so-called Menti quiz for you tonight. If you would like to participate, and I assume a lot of you will do, please make sure you go to the website menti.com. Menti.com, or download the Mentimeter app. We will share the login code when we get started with the quiz. Let me make, as an introduction, a few startup remarks. It's a special day. A lot of us, I think, are a bit nervous, including I myself. Election day in the United States, with all the consequences for the US itself, and of course for the rest of the world. We have already some results. The tiny hamlet of Dixie Notch already voted. That is the politics of folklore. 4 years ago, there were 13 registered voters in this small place in the beautiful mountains of New Hampshire. 13 people voted in 2016. 8 of those votes went to Hillary Clinton, majority. Now, in 2020, only 5 registered voters. All of the votes went to Mr. Biden. And I assume that the Trump campaign will not be that nervous because of this first result. Anyway, voting records will be shattered today and tomorrow, because the count will go on in quite a few states, like Pennsylvania. Voting records will be shattered. Have you seen the lines in Harris County, in Texas? Incredible. Already more people voted before this election day than in 2016. It's unbelievable. In person, early votes, that's possible. Absentee votes, postal votes sent. Florida is at 90%, 9-0, at the beginning of this day. And we are counting. So it's my guess, we reached already the 100 million mark, that it could be 150 million maybe, or even a bit more. That will definitely be a real record. Ladies and gentlemen, if you checked the websites like Real Clear Politics or 538, they're almost famous, those websites. So many millions of people are checking, maybe for the last 6, 7, 8 months, all these polls. They all come together in those websites. When you checked 2 days ago, 3 days ago, it was like a blue wave. It was Biden all over the place. In the 6, 7 swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, North Carolina, a few others, Biden was ahead. This morning, I was early in the morning at breakfast television in the Netherlands before I left, and in the taxi, I check one more time. And then I saw that, for instance, in Florida, Mr. Trump, it's only one poll, was up 2%. And that was the poll from Trafalgar Group. bit associated with the Republicans, but this was the only pollster who got it right in 2016, predicting a Trump victory. So that's, I think, interesting to see. And it's not only in Florida that Mr. Trump was a little bit up. There were also a few polls on Pennsylvania. Yes, to be honest, 3 or 4 were in favor of Mr. Biden, but also 1 or 2 gave Mr. Trump the lead. So it's getting closer, and that creates a lot of excitement and tension. Mr. Trump, as we all know, especially Mr. Trump, is campaigning, campaigning, and campaigning. 5 rallies a day, and that for an ex-corona patient. Yeah? Unbelievable, in the streaming rain, and trying to win each vote, trying to bridge the gap. We will see what happens. There are so many questions tonight to answer. We cannot answer them all, but we try to give you as much as possible info. Background information, a bit of storytelling. One of the questions is, in 2016, just as an example, African Americans voted 8% for Mr. Trump, and the Latino voters 28% for Mr. Vote. Will he score better, Mr. Trump? We will see. We will come back to these numbers later, and also to other numbers. And we don't want to have a boring evening with only numbers, 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 but sometimes you need them, and definitely in the end. So, who will win this election day? I don't want to give you a prediction. We keep the excitement in the air. We will have quite a few speakers. I announced that already. It is my pleasure to introduce Marja Verloop. Marja is normally the Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Embassy here in The Hague. But while Ambassador Hoekstra is away, your title is Chargé d'Affaires. And you have a long experience. I assume at the State Department you worked, at the Bureau for, as a Deputy Executive Director for East Asian and Pacific Affairs Bureau. And you served your country in quite a lot of embassies. I think it was Poland, Namibia, Canada, India. Wow, you traveled the globe. And maybe I forgot a few other countries. Canada, I mentioned already. So, will you give the speech, the introductory speech? Thank you.
Good evening. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Willem, for joining and partnering with us this evening. It's a delight. It feels like such a tradition to have election evenings around the world. And we are, of course, saddened that due to COVID, we cannot have the hundreds of people that we normally have at such events. But hopefully we're reaching out to you at home and with student groups and everybody else and all of our partners across the Netherlands, and we're delighted to have you. So why am I looking forward to tonight? I'm looking forward to tonight because election days truly are such a celebration of democracy. This is a particularly important year because we are celebrating so many historic electoral milestones. And we're also going to celebrate the diversity of the United States. So, as Willem mentioned, tonight really culminates just months of campaigning, right? It's exhausting and exhilarating and all the rest of it. And we are approximately halfway through Election Day, not quite. We probably have about 8 more hours till the polls close on the West Coast. But we are seeing these unprecedented early voting numbers, and that's pretty exciting to be part of. So we have more than 100 million votes already in, about 73% of the 2016 totals. As a public servant and as an American serving overseas, it's always incredibly humbling to see the type of global interest that there is in our elections and there is in US democracy. And as I started out with, Election Day truly is a celebration of this democracy. Citizens are coming out and they're making their voices heard. So whether I'm in the US or I'm working in a number of countries overseas, I always get the same sense of excitement and anticipation. You know, I voted by mail this year, but you still get excited when you're doing it by mail. And I was very pleased because I did it with my teenager this year to introduce her to voting overseas. And it is a particular honor to be here this year in the Netherlands. As some people know, of course, it's a personal point of pride for both Ambassador Hoekstra and I to have been born here in the Netherlands. and I think it has special resonance on an election day. So the founding fathers of the U.S. turned to the Netherlands when they were looking for a model of democracy, right? They turned to this country when we were looking in our quest for independence, everything from initial funding to fund our war for independence to the very tenets of our foundational documents. So our Declaration of Independence was based on the Plakkaat van Verlatinge. And we looked at the Union of Utrecht to see how our states could work together. And I think it's fascinating because as the founding fathers were trying to build support for our fledgling union, they said, you know what? There is nothing more important right now than our Dutch population. And so as they drafted the Constitution, George Washington said to his team, this needs to be translated into Dutch. If we want to win support from New York, it has to be translated into Dutch. So I brought a prop today. So this, if anybody can see here, is a copy of the preamble of the Constitution translated in Dutch and signed by George Washington. And this was issued to all the residents of New York to try to engage the citizenry and to stir up public discourse and to have a debate about where this country was founded and where it was going. And it's currently in the archives at the Library of Congress, and I have a copy that sits in my office. It's incredibly humbling and it's incredibly special. And so I think about that. If you can imagine, as a Dutch-born U.S. diplomat, I have this hanging on the wall in my office. And it's interesting because as public servants in the U.S., we pledge an oath to the Constitution. So every morning I come in, I see this on my wall. This is the Constitution I have taken an oath to. And for those of you who don't know or perhaps aren't familiar, the preamble of the Constitution starts with these words. It starts with, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." Okay? Inhabited in those words was the sort of quest for a more perfect union, right? Recognizing that it would be continuous, recognizing that it would be the focus of every election there to come. I think it also shows this incredible commitment to citizen-led democracy, to freedom of speech, to freedom of the press, to freedom of assembly, to freedom of religion, these things that truthfully is very much, of course, encompassed in the Constitution, and things that we share with the Netherlands and have shared since our very founding days. So democracies are not static. They are constantly evolving, and the definition of we the people has also been expanding over time. So this year, we are celebrating some really historic electoral milestones that I'm hoping that everybody can toast to with me. So our first election was in 1788, and at that time, the voting electorate was about 6% of the population. So not a huge percentage of the population was allowed to vote. But 150 years ago today, in 1870, the 15th Amendment passed, expanding voting to all male citizens without regard to color, race, or previous condition of servitude. This was further expanded by the 19th Amendment, which was ratified in 1920. So that was 100 years ago today, and that is this pin. And that gave women the right to vote. And then 50 years ago, in 1970, the Constitution passed an additional amendment, the 26th Amendment, lowering the voting age from 21 to 18, so people who had been fighting in Vietnam War could vote as well as fight on behalf of their country. So we have continued to celebrate and see this constant evolving and the celebrating of democracy in action. We're on track to potentially exceed record numbers. We could potentially hit 150 million votes, which would be our largest voter turnout since 1900. Already, more than 6 million voters under the age of 30 have cast their ballots. This is in comparison to 2 million people under the age of 30 who cast their ballots in 2016. Pretty dramatic increase. Election Day is also an incredibly great day to celebrate the diversity of the United States, not just of our people, but of our states themselves. So the U.S. is often defined as a nation of immigrants. There are more than 23 million foreign-born citizens of the United States eligible to vote in this election. That is 10% of our nation's electorate. And since our founding in 1776, the U.S. has continued to become a country that has one of the most diverse populations in history. The diversity of our people is really only matched by the diversity of our states. The The United States is enormous. It's an incredibly expansive geography, and that tremendous diversity gets reflected in the differences in our cultures across the states, the priorities that are different, the economies are different. So here in Europe, if you think about driving from the very northern tip of Sweden to the very southern tip of Spain, it's approximately 4,000 kilometers. That's about the distance it takes to get from New York to LA. You go through a lot of different countries in that span. You go through a lot of different states. And the fascinating thing about Election Day is this is a time to really learn about and appreciate those differences in the states. Truthfully, most of the time, we don't know what's going on in all 50 states. But on Election Day, you get this small little window into the various priorities that are taking place in the various states and what matters to them. Because we focus overseas very much in this competitive race that is the presidential race, but much of the energy and time and money is also spent on all these down ballot races. Right? We're voting for governors. We're voting for a third of our senators. We're voting for 435 members of Congress. We're voting for local officials. We're voting for mayors and judicial appointees and sheriffs and your board of governors or your school board. There's lots and lots of people on those ballots. So ballots different for state to state, and every state could have different ballot measures on. So it's sort of a fascinating civics class to realize just how different it is. So keep that in mind as we hopefully go throughout this evening. Use the elections hopefully as a chance to learn a little bit more about the United States and the various issues and concerns that matter. And I hope that you join me in feeling as excited as I do about Election Day. I think that we're happy to share this interest with our Dutch colleagues and our Dutch partners and with people from all around Europe who are joining us this evening. And I certainly invite all of you to join us tomorrow, starting at 6 a.m. here. We will be live streaming as well, looking at the results coming in. So hopefully this will be a fun evening, and tomorrow we can turn our attention to some of the further results. We need a little bit of sleep, not much, but thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I like that sentence. You said a civic class. This whole voting process is like a civic class. So your home state, when do you think the results will be known? Have you any idea?
So I don't. So I will say that throughout my career, I've lived in many countries overseas. I've also voted in many different states. So I have voted in California and Washington State and Washington, D.C. and New Jersey and Virginia, and I'm currently registered in Florida. And I did vote by mail in Florida. So I've joined the League of Battleground States, so I don't know.
You can make the difference. In 2020, no, I'm wrong, in 2000, only 537 was the difference between Mr. Gore and Mr. Bush. So each vote counts. I learned my lesson already, the civic lesson. And well, thank you so much for this. Thank you. Thank you. And let me remind you again to download the Mentimeter app or go to menti.com to be able to join our quiz. It's real fun. Yes, well, the US electoral system. Today, maybe it's stretched out a bit, but anyway, let's say today, Election Day, you can win, Mr. Biden or Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden, 538 electoral votes in total. If you win in a state, if you have the most votes, all the electoral votes go to you. 538. It depends, to make a complicated story a bit simple, it depends partly how many people live in such a state. For instance, in California, you can win 55 electoral votes. But in Alaska, where you only have bears, well, Mrs. Palin lives there, and a few others in the mountains, hunters, you only have 3 electoral votes. So, if you win the most votes in Alaska, you get 3 electoral votes. If you win most votes in California, then you get all the electoral 55 votes from that state. That brings me to 2016. Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton I have to say, she won, in the end, 232 electoral votes. You will become the president if you have at least half of 538, 269, but then one more. If you win 270 or more, you are the next US president. Hillary won 232. If she would have won 3 of the swing states, mostly in the north, Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes, Michigan, 16 electoral votes, Pennsylvania, 20 electoral votes, that is 46. Well, it's not too difficult, 232 and 46, that makes 278, Mrs. Clinton, the United States president. But she didn't win. With less than 1% in each state, Mr. Trump won those 3 states. 77,000 votes in total. That is almost nothing. It was razor thin. But you win. This is what voting is. Each vote counts. I say this to build the bridge to our next guest, Gijs Toussaint from the city of Utrecht. I remember that Ambassador Hoekstra, with a few other people, visited your university. Gijs, you are studying history at the University of Utrecht, and you gave an overview of swing states. Not only those 3 states I just mentioned, but also the Sunbelt states, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona. Maybe you will also say something about Texas. I'm not sure if it's now a swing state, we will see. There's so much tension now. Texas also, we will see. Gijs, I give you the floor. You are also member of the local D66 or D66 board, but here you are in your capacity as a, well, let's say an America expert. We have a lot of America experts in the Netherlands, but you are one of them now. Please, step on the podium and tell us what you want us to tell and show us maybe a few things. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's see if this is on. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Like Willem said, my name is Gijs and I study history at Utrecht University. And for the last few years, I have been obsessed with American politics. So I've been especially obsessed with these presidential elections. So tonight is going to be a very exciting night because we will finally find out if Donald Trump can stay for 4 more years or whether Joe Biden will replace him in the White House. Although, whether we will find out tonight is a bit of a question mark. As with everything, the pandemic makes everything more complicated and more confusing. So let's see why that is, and then let's look at some important swing states that can tell us whether we are in for a very long night, maybe we're in for a very long week, before we know who wins. So the reason why this is going to be maybe a confusing night is because of the massive amount of mail-in ballots that play a big role this year. Because of the pandemic, people think voting in person might be risky. Maybe they're part of a vulnerable group, so they vote early by sending their ballot in through the mail or by dropping it off in special drop boxes. Now, that is completely normal and is something that happens in every election. However, there are some states that are not used to receiving that amount of mail-in ballots, and all states have different rules and procedures about processing those ballots, counting them, whether they can call out the results early or later. So that makes an important difference. Now let's look at some important states. This right here is the magic map in the race to 270 electoral votes, which, like Willem said, is what is necessary to win the presidency. Now on here, you see all these blue states, which are probably safe for Joe Biden, and all these red states, which are probably safe for Donald Trump. And it's not about those states, it's about those brownish states where the polls are very tight, which is what we call swing states. Now, even in deciding what is a swing state, you are doing something controversial. There might be people looking at this map saying, well, Ohio should be a swing state, or they might be surprised to see Texas on here. Texas is a state that for the past 40 years has been a reliable state for Republicans. Trump won it by 9 points. Before that, Mitt Romney, when he was running against President Obama, won it by 16, I believe. But this year, the polls down there are very close, and Joe Biden has a real chance of winning it. But those are not the states I'll be keeping my eye on tonight. The states I'll be watching first are these: North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Now, there are a few reasons for that. First of all, their polls close quite early, around 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m. Central European time. And the second reason is they'll probably have a lot of the results as well, because these states can start processing those mail-in ballots quite early, which means that they'll probably know who won in those states tonight. The third reason is these states can decide whether we will know quite early who has won, or whether we will have to wait longer into the night, or maybe even for the rest of the week to find out who will be the next president. And now let me show you why that is. So I've changed the map up a bit, and I've tried to be fair to President Trump. I've given him Iowa and Texas, which are states that are close, but Trump seems to be the favorite in those. And in this situation, Joe Biden wins Florida. Now, what you see up here is that puts Joe Biden very close to 270 electoral votes. In fact, so close that he only needs to win one more of those swing states to become president. And in this situation, Donald Trump cannot afford to lose any one of those states, otherwise he will lose. Now, the chances of that happening, especially if Joe Biden wins Florida early in the night, around, let's say, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., those chances are very, very slim. There's another scenario where Joe Biden will be very happy, which is he doesn't necessarily win Florida, but he does win Georgia and North Carolina. Again, that puts him very close to 270, and at that point he's almost there. And then, just to tease the Democrats out there a little bit, this is the ultimate dream scenario. He wins all of those 3 states. Let's say he wins them by clear margins, around 2 a.m., 3 a.m. We see clear wins for Joe Biden in those 3 states. Now, well, as you can see, that puts him well over 270, and at that point, the night is basically decided. However, this doesn't need to happen. There's a very real chance, because the polls are very tight, that Biden does not win in those states. Let's look at that situation. So, right here, North Carolina does go to Joe Biden, but Georgia and Florida go to President Trump. And then we see a very tight race down there at the top. Then the focus will go to other states, like this one right here, Arizona. Now, Arizona won't decide the night because, as you can see, it won't put either candidate over 270, but the one who wins Arizona is probably the clear favorite to win the presidency. Now, Arizona can also process those mail-in ballots that I was talking about quite early, so they'll probably know their results tonight, but they're in a different time zone, their polls close a little later, and so we will probably only know where Arizona goes around 5 or 6 a.m. So if it comes down to Arizona, be prepared to stay up all night. Then there are these other 3 states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and the state where the ambassador is right now, Michigan, the so-called Rust Belt. This is where the 2016 election between Hillary Clinton and Trump was decided. Right now, in Wisconsin and Michigan, polls are looking very good for Joe Biden. Pennsylvania is a little tighter. But in this situation, these states will decide the presidential election. If that happens, we'll have to wait for a while, because these states can only start counting their mail-in ballots today, tonight. And in Pennsylvania's case, they've said we'll only start doing that by tomorrow. And so we'll only have definitive results from those states by Wednesday, Thursday, maybe even Friday. That is not necessarily a problem. Like I said, mail-in ballots are part of the US election every year. And those projections you see on a normal election night by CNN are just that. They're projections. They're never definitive results. However, what comes into play here and what will make it even more confusing is the fact that Democrats, the people who are going to vote for Joe Biden, tend to vote more by those mail-in ballots, while Republicans, the people who will vote for Trump, tend to vote more in person. So in these states, where they are counting the mail-in ballots later in the week, you'll probably see a lead for President Trump tonight and tomorrow, because those in-person votes come in first. And after that, slowly Joe Biden might overtake him. In that situation, maybe President Trump declares, well, you see, I've won. And then Friday we find out maybe he hasn't won. So in this situation, I'd say stay patient, trust the process. Eventually, all votes will be counted, and eventually we will know who has won. So to wrap this all up, President Trump's path to victory is still a lot more difficult than Joe Biden's is. Remember, in these maps I've just shown you, I've given President Trump Iowa and Texas every time. But there is a chance that Joe Biden wins those states. Let's say we have a big surprise tonight and Joe Biden wins Texas. At that point, it is basically over and Joe Biden will certainly win the presidency. So tonight, I'll be keeping my eye on Georgia, North Carolina, and especially Florida. But if those states don't give us conclusive results, prepare yourself for a long night, or maybe even a long week. Thank you.
Thank you, Gijs. So, well, Gijs, that was now really an in-depth analysis of the swing states. Thank you for this. You gave us a lot of information in a very pleasant way. You told us, explained to us. And yes, let me make a few remarks in between. I mean in between, because we will have the quiz in a few minutes. I already got some apps, questions from people here in the, well, the small audience we have. I think we have Mr. Rutte, our Prime Minister, allows us to have 25 people, I think, and we have 22, if I counted well. Yes, when should we be awake this night here in the Netherlands? Come on, folks. During election night, you never sleep 1 second. But if you want to have an advice, definitely be awake. Well, I think 3:30, 4 o'clock. Gijs alluded already to this. The Sunbelt states, Florida, in Florida, for instance, you can count already the ballots that were sent in 20 days ago. And they're very quick with counting in Florida. So the expectation is when the polls close in Florida that after 1 or 2 hours, results will be known. That could give a signal which way it goes. Mr. Trump wins with a few percent. Okay, Mr. Biden, it says something. Because in the other states, and you said it, Pennsylvania, well, that will take a few days to count all those postal votes. Remember, this is not a centralized country, the United States of America. It happens in the states, and all of these states have different rules. Let me share with you some question marks. Let's start with Mr. Trump. Okay, he still is, till this very day, at least a bit behind in the polls. But what is he doing then these last days? Well, doing mass rallies. I said it already in the beginning. Trying to mobilize the people in small town America. Let's say ordinary people who live far away from Washington. Angry people 4 years ago, disappointed in Washington politics. In these last 4 years, Mr. Trump, and I will go to Mr. Biden to also make a few remarks, let's say in his direction. Mr. Trump, well, he promised a lot, but if you speak with his fan base, and I went to a few of those states, in the Midwest and the South and the Mountain West, if you speak with his supporters, his fans, they say, well, this is the first president who delivered. We got really a tax break. And small business people, the business tax was lowered to lowered to 21%. Important, US economy, of course. Stock market, okay, fantastic from time to time. Till the China virus, as they call it. The stock market, the jobless rate went down and down and down. A lot of people are conservative in the Midwest and the South, and they are very proud of being a conservative. And they said, well, look at this, all the conservative judges. He promised it, and he did it. Look at the people in the Midwest and the South who are in the military. It's not so easy to find a job in the Midwest and the South, especially because a lot of those jobs went to China. If you talk with the supporters of Mr. Trump, you hear these stories. In the military, you can start up a career. So a lot of families in the Midwest and the South, they have people in the army. And Mr. Trump promised them to stop endless wars like his predecessors were involved in. Mr. Obama, Mr. Bush, other presidents, and he delivered. Those are the messages that came from the Trump base. And Mr. Trump is once again mobilizing his core base. He knows that it's not necessary to win 50% or more of the electorate. It's about the electoral votes. You have to win the states. So his mass rallies continued, and Mr. Trump also says it shows energy if you have all these people who are very happy what I did as a president. Till the coronavirus came, and because of the Chinese, so the Chinese virus. I mentioned already that number of 8% of the African vote that Mr. Trump won in 2016, only 8%, and 26% of the Hispanic votes. The Trump campaign is counting now on more support from African Americans and Latinos. Why? Well, that's a long story, but Mr. Trump says, well, the jobless rate went down in an historic way that was very much to the advantage of African Americans and Latinos. And also, I reformed the crime system. That, for instance, if you are living in the inner cities, where a lot of drugs is, and you use marijuana or something else, I think it's crazy, and he changed it, that you end up in jail for maybe the rest of your life. And Mr. Trump gave money to African prestigious universities, like Howard College, for instance. And he promised also investments in cities. There are counter stories, but I'm here now to help a little bit the Trump campaign, and now I help a bit the Biden campaign. Oh, the Latinos. Mr. Trump needs a lot of Latino support in Florida, especially, because in Florida, 30% of the Latinos are from Cuba, immigrants from Cuba. They don't like socialism there, or communism. They fled Cuba to live in a free country. And also people from Venezuela and other countries in Latin America. They went to the US for freedom. So Mr. Trump is saying, if the Democrats are in charge, that will be too much left-wing, that is socialism. The Democratic Party is becoming more and more left-wing. You don't want that. And there is now also polling going on these last days that showed that, well, especially the Latino vote, that could help Mr. Trump in Florida. Okay, we will see what happens. Question marks. Mr. Biden, what is he doing? You could say the opposite. So now I help a little bit with my remarks the Biden campaign to show you what are the positive developments maybe for Mr. Biden. Well, Mr. Biden is blaming the president for not doing enough in fighting against the coronavirus. He is talking behind the mask, not always, but sometimes. He is not doing an on-the-ground campaign. Only these last few weeks, Mr. Biden had his rallies, but just for a limited number of people, not those huge rallies of Mr. Trump. He's doing a social media campaign from his house in Wilmington, Delaware. Yeah, and basically that was it. Even at CNN, what is more or less a pro-Biden broadcaster and anti-Trump in this polarized climate. Even CNN remarked, Jake Tapper, for instance, one of those famous journalists at CNN, he said, well, it's a bit weird that Mr. Biden is not campaigning really. Well, apart from the last 2 weeks. Then Mr. Biden is also all over the place, but limited numbers. Mr. Biden is presenting himself as a Franklin Delano Roosevelt because of all the problems we have in the United States with the economy, with Corona. And Mr. Biden said, if I become president, we need to invest, invest, invest. So trillions of dollars will be spent in the infrastructure, the bridges and the roads, but also critical infrastructure, artificial intelligence. We need to invest, and we need many, many more jobs. So my first 100 days, that was also what Franklin Roosevelt did in the crisis of the 30s when he became president, that will be crucial to reform the United States of America. Well, we will see. His base is, of course, also the African Americans and the Latinos and the older white voters. You could also say he wants to expand his base to all of the people in the United States, but you have to focus, of course, a bit with your strategy. So African American voters, also with the help of Barack Obama, President Obama, and Michelle. I haven't seen Michelle, by the way, these last days, but President Obama was in Philadelphia helping Mr. Biden. But one more question mark. 4 years ago, Mr. Obama begged almost in those stadiums with 25,000 people, Obama supporters. He begged, vote, vote, vote for Hillary. They didn't do it. We will see if there is now more enthusiasm for Mr. Biden. Well, in South Carolina, he was saved by the African American voters, so could be the case. We will see. The Hispanics, they are not that enthusiastic about Mr. Biden. He will win a majority of voters, but not like Hillary Clinton, we assume. We will see what happens. Question mark. He is counting on older white voters. Mr. Biden is a bit like Florence Nightingale, putting his arm around your shoulders. I feel your pain. If you lost someone because of the coronavirus, I'm here for you as a president. I will help you. Florence Nightingale candidate almost. I feel your pain once again. So we will see if that helps. And also the suburban voters are very important, and that could be the difference. If the women in the suburbs will vote for Mr. Biden in a majority vote. Mr. Trump had a counter story, he said, stressing law and order. Do you want to have all those riots and defunding the police, what Bernie Sanders want, and all the other radicals in the Democratic Party? Well, Mr. Biden, of course, said, I am not a radical Democrat, I'm not a socialist, I'm a moderate Democrat. Question marks, question marks, question marks, but I thought it's maybe useful to name a few of those question marks, because the winner has the answers. If Mr. Biden wins, he will say, well, this was my strategy, and we won. Why critical about my social media campaign behind the mask in Wilmington, Delaware? If Mr. Trump wins, he will say, yes, energy counts. The economy till March counts. Americans are not stupid. They remember how good the economy was till March, and then the Chinese with their virus. Well, different stories. The good thing is, sometimes people say, politicians, it's basically all the same. Now, come on, folks. The difference between Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden, that's not so difficult to see. Two different policies in many, many respects. Now it's time for the quiz, and then I I'm still very good on time, so that is also important. Steve Butler. Steve, where are you? Steve, I heard a lot of stories about your being a fantastic quiz master. You are the political economic counselor at the US Embassy in The Hague, and you regularly organize trivia nights for your colleagues. So you're the perfect pick to be our quiz master tonight. And you're very curious, do people know really a lot about US politics? So may I invite you to come to the podium?
Thank you very much, Willem. So I'd like to welcome everybody who's joined us here this evening in person, and I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us online out there. And I will say that before he leaves the room, Willem clearly knows a lot about the U.S. electoral process, and if you were paying attention earlier, he gave away about half the quiz. So if you were paying attention, you'll know about half the answers, at least to the first round. The way we're going to do this is we will do two separate quizzes so that we can have two separate sets of winners. I think we may have some swag to give away later on. So our first quiz, you see here, if you haven't already taken the opportunity to go to menti.com, or download the app, the code for the first quiz is 4824503. We'll have a separate code for the second quiz, and we'll put that up later so everybody can participate in that one. So if you're just about ready, I see a couple of people still putting in the code, so we'll give them just a moment before we get started. Your first round will be 10 questions, and we'll have a little pause after the first 5 so that we can take stock and see who's in the lead. So looks like most people in the room are ready. I trust that people online at home are ready. So let's go to the first question. All right, round 1. Let's have the first question. You'll have 15 seconds to answer each question. All right. How many electors make up the Electoral College? 435, 535, 538, or 270? This is one of those that might have been given away early on. All right. We had 41 people get it right, 538. That's the 435 members of the House of Representatives plus the 100 senators that represent all of the states. And you total those together, you get 538, and that's how they apportion them through the states. All right, ready for question 2. How many electoral votes does it take to win the election? 270, 250, 300, or 151? Once again, Willem gave this one away early. That's right. We got 78 people. Almost everybody got that one right. 270 votes in the Electoral College will win the election. That's the number to watch tonight and tomorrow morning. All right, let's go to question 3. How long is a president's term of office? 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, or 8 years? I got 85. Almost everybody got that one right. Good. All right, we got a lot of people who know a lot about the American political system, but I think we may also have some self-selecting folks here as well this evening. Let's go on to the next question, please. On what day does a new president take office? January 1, January 20, March 4th, or April 15th? And 69 folks got it right with January 20th. In fact, March 4th used to be Inauguration Day. So George Washington was inaugurated on March 4th. And that continued for many, many decades until it was changed by law. April 15th, of course, is the tax filing day in the U.S. That's not a happy day for most people. Let's move on to question 5. Which state has the most electoral votes? Is it Texas, Florida, New York, or California? In that order. Texas, Florida, New York, California. All of them very populous states. 67 folks get it right with California. That's right. 55 electoral votes, as Willem mentioned earlier. So let's move on to our next question. That's right, we have our leaderboard now. So we've got a lot of people who've got everything right so far. Fantastic. Does anyone here in the room see your name on that leaderboard? All right, we've got at least a couple of hands going up in the room with us here in person who are in that top 10 on the leaderboard. I suspect we may have a few other people who also have a perfect score of 5,000, maybe who aren't showing up. Maybe I should have made this more difficult. All right, let's move to question 6. Whoever wins the popular vote in a state automatically wins all of that state's electoral votes. True or false? Here it comes. That is false. We tricked a few people on this one. Only 31 folks out of 85 got it right. So we have 2 states, Maine and Nebraska, which actually apportion their electoral votes based on the congressional district. So you can actually win a single, perhaps one candidate could win a single electoral vote in Maine, and the other candidate could win 2. So there are 2 states that do divide their electoral votes up that way. Let's move on to question number 7. Who chooses the president if the Electoral College vote ends in a tie? The Senate, the Supreme Court, the House of Representatives, or is it a coin toss? "33 people know that it's the House of Representatives, yes. Now, in some local races in states and at local levels, ties can be settled by a coin toss, but not the presidential election. That goes to the House of Representatives. Let's move to the next question, please. How many times has the House of Representatives had to choose the president? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Wow, we've got an even split, and it's 2. 2 times it happened. It happened in 1800 when Thomas Jefferson was elected president, and it happened again in 1824 when John Quincy Adams actually was elected president in what came to be called the corrupt bargain, in which Henry Clay basically, in controlling the House of Representatives, made a deal that whichever candidate would name him Secretary of State would get his support and his party's support, and therefore win in the House of Representatives. So let's move on to our number 9 question, please. What is the term of office of a member of the U.S. House of Representatives? 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, or 8 years? We know that a president is 4 years. What's a member of the House? It's 2 years. 24 people got that right. So Yeah, I made the second half of this one a little harder than the first half. So we should be moving on to number 10, and then we'll get a look at who won the round. How many of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives are up for grabs in any given election cycle? 1/3, 1/2, 2/3, or all of them? And the answer is all of them. Ooh, only 17. Only 17 folks got that one right. So I think we've created some separation on that final leaderboard. We'll see if the second quiz is just as hard, but those first few I wanted to make them easy and get everybody warmed up and feeling good. So let's see how it came out with the first quiz round here. Uh-oh. All right, so we have 3 individuals who scored 9,000. Fantastic. That's 9 out of 10. That's great. We've got a number of other folks. We've got 1, 2, 3. We've got 6 who came in with 8 out of 10, and another one who came in with 7,000. So, congratulations. We've got somebody here in the room. Yes. Oh, that's an excellent question. Thank you. That's an excellent question. So for those who may not have heard it, and especially for folks online, the question is, in the event of an Electoral College tie, the decision moves to the House of Representatives. And the question is, which House of Representatives votes for the president? Is it the one that we have today, or is it the one that gets elected today? And the answer is it's the one that gets elected today. Because the members of the House of Representatives who are up for election today will take their seats on January 3rd. The Electoral College vote has to be confirmed by, I believe, January 6th. And so it's the new House, the newly seated House that's only been in for a couple of days that will sit and decide the winner of the election. And in the event that an election does go to the House of Representatives, you don't actually have a party line vote where every member gets a vote. They vote by state delegation, which is an interesting way to do it. So that, for example, the Nebraska delegation meets and takes a vote, and Nebraska gets 1 vote. The Kentucky delegation sits together, they take a vote amongst their 8 members, and Kentucky gets 1 vote. And any delegation, let's say, Kentucky's actually a good example. It's my home state. There are 8 representatives in the House. So you could theoretically have a tie. If you have 4 Democrats and 4 Republican representatives, you could have a tie. And in that case, if Kentucky were to return a tied vote, they get no vote whatsoever. It's not counted. And so the president is the one who is selected by the majority of the state delegations in that instance. So it's an excellent question. Thank you very much. So congratulations to everybody up on the leaderboard. I think getting 7, 8, 9 of those questions is fantastic. So well done, and I will hand it back over to Willem, and I will be back later on for the second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Yeah, we have smart people in the audience, eh? Wow, all these results. Martijn van Helvert, you are a member of the Dutch National Parliament for the Christian Democrats here in the Netherlands. So we call it in the Netherlands Tweede Kamer, Tweede Kamerlid, member of the second chamber. You are from Sittard in the southern part of Limburg, and I have a few questions for you. So may I invite you to the podium? Maybe you will sit there and we keep the distance. So if you will sit there. If I may say Martijn?
Yeah, of course.
Martijn?
That's my name.
Oh yeah. Martijn, you, apart from being a member of parliament, you are also the chair of the contact group. What is the contact group?
In the Dutch Parliament, we have several contact groups with our neighbors. For years, we had contact groups with Germany, Belgium, France, the United Kingdom. And when the ambassador of the United States came to the Netherlands and we met, I just was only a few months the spokesperson for Foreign Affairs. He asked me, why isn't there a contact group, a friendship group, a caucus for the United States? I said, actually, I don't know. And then we decided that we should make one. And so we did. It took actually a while because the chair of the parliament, Mrs. Arip, was very scared that we should travel to the United States often, and that would cost
empty
too much,
seats, empty seats.
too much empty seats as well. It took so long that I dropped a resolution in the parliament, and nobody dared to say no. So
Of course,
there was
well,
one.
it's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, so you are in the midst of this relationship between the Netherlands and the United States.
Yeah.
Why is this an important relationship?
Well, as I dropped in the parliament, and also to our to the chair of the parliament, to the speaker of the house, they say in the United States, I said we have ties, very strong ties with the United States. Of course, economically, very strong ties. Also military. I should still say we're a little bit dependent on the United States.
little bit?
And a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And to keep also friends here, I say a little bit. But the most important thing is that we have enormous historical, cultural, and familiar ties with the United States, and that's so strong that actually a country like the United States really has to have a contact group. I call it actually always a friendship group with the United States. Okay. And so my colleague said, well, with the United States, and I don't like Mr. Trump, some of my colleagues said. I said, well, that's not relevant. I said, it's a friendship group with our colleagues of the Congress, and it's because the United States are such a strong, strong ally.
Yeah, and have you visited a U.S. presidential campaign?
Yes, I did twice. I was.
What was the highlight, or what did you learn from that?
Well, what I did learn was the grassroots method. I think at that time it was in the Netherlands not very known, and we try to do that in the Netherlands as well now. But the Americans are far more. In the Netherlands, we're the amateurs actually in campaigning, and we just wrote everything down in our party. And I think we were not the only party. What we thought was good for our country, and wrote it down, and we put it in a copy machine and then throw it in the air. And we thought everybody will grab it from the ground to read what we would think it's important. No, but that's not the way it works. And in America, I learned that, and also to ask directly what you want to know from your voter. Know your voter, and what do you want to know? Campaigning is not convincing people. I had to do that in the last 4 years, I learned there. But campaigning is counting people. May I count on your vote? That's what you want to know. If I ask, what do you think about the Christian Democrats? Well, I get one bucket of, how do you say that properly? One bucket of shit over your, when I ask that. But so that's not the question you want to ask. The question is, may I count on your vote? And that's something I learned, and it works.
Yeah, and so you have your elections. Well, I'm also a Dutchman. We have our elections for the parliament in March.
Yeah.
So you learned a lot from the Americans, and you're looking to the campaigns now for Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump. Do you prefer a candidate?
Well, the word Biden in Dutch, when you say I want Biden, then you you say I want both of them.
Both.
Biden is both. So that's but that's a very political answer. Actually, I don't know. No. Because the people in the United States are really in two polarized camps at this moment, that I really hope we need the president in the United States that can bring them more together. And sometimes in the Netherlands I hear people say Trump polarized the people. Well, I don't know if that's totally true, because I think sometimes the way Obama, for instance, acts with very kind words also polarized a little bit the people, because people thought, yeah, very nice words, but what are the deeds? So I don't actually that you can say that president will bring them more together than the other one. I don't know. So, well, what I really think is important, that we can cooperate as European countries, together with the United States, for instance, on the matter of China. And the president that can bring us back together, Europe and the United States, I think that's very important.
Were you shocked when President Trump pressured the European allies from NATO to pay more?
No, well, the way how he said it, that is not we were.
Yeah,
that's something
sometimes
we
you
were
need
used.
tough words, or not?
But actually Obama, well, when Obama came out of the airplane, he waved and smiled and said hope and said hope, and then he came to the table
Yes, we
and said
can.
you have to pay
Yeah.
2%. Also Obama said.
Yes, you can. Yeah,
Yes,
that's what
you
he said.
yes
Yeah.
you pay. And but when Trump comes out of the plane, he looks angry and says you have to pay the 2%. So it's the same message with another tone of voice. And actually, I think there Mr. Trump has a point, and Obama had a point. So that's something that's true. But maybe on bringing Europe together, it could be that, for instance, Biden sees more, I think, future in binding the European states. And that's also, again, important for our relation with the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
What will be the relation with the United Kingdom and the United States when you compare to the relation with Europe?
Yeah.
But
If
also
you-
on the Iran deal, I'm very interested.
What do you want from the president?
Well, we always said it's a pity that you dropped the Iran deal. I know the Iran deal it's not a beautiful deal, but we were on speaking terms at least. I know that the way the United States Mr. Trump works, he says, no, it takes too long and Europe is only debating and you're doing nothing. I understand that, but still, yeah, that's well our way of working, but the United States do that different.
Well, you need to talk with Mr. Biden and your colleagues. If he becomes the president, and actually I asked him when we were in New Hampshire, and that was a town hall meeting with maybe 100 or 200 people, and he talked with everyone, Mr. Biden. So I certainly also talked with him, and for 1 second or 10 seconds or 1 minute.
You've got a picture?
And a picture. He made it.
Oh, he
a
made it.
selfie. Yeah, he took my telephone.
Cool.
And then
Politicians love that.
I was a bit surprised. Wow, a presidential candidate in February, last February. So I said, well, have you been to the Netherlands? Yes, one time. Oh, so we hope if you become the president that you come to the Netherlands. And he said yes. So I will invite him to you. I couldn't
That's a
ask
promise.
Mr. Trump. I was also at a Trump rally, but there you had 25,000 spectators. So no way that I could ask Mr. Trump a question. But otherwise, I would have asked Mr. Trump, so we like to see you in the Netherlands. We love discussions with politicians, with Mr. Biden or Mr. Trump. Not the two of them. I once got a question on Dutch television, why not two presidents in the United States? And I thought, well, that's a very strange question. One
A little
personal...
bit Roman.
That could be, two consuls
That's-
in ancient Rome.
That's true. That's
Last question and a bit personal. You are from Sittard,
I am.
in the southern part of Limburg.
The most nicest part.
That's not far from Margraten.
No,
that
it's not.
also has an influence on how you are looking at the United States?
Yes, I think, because it really the more close you come to Margraten, the more it lives in the society there. Yeah. You really have to be in line. You have to subscribe to get one grave that you can adopt.
Okay.
I still don't have a grave that I can adopt because I'm
You're
not
on
already.
waiting list?
I'm waiting. I'm on the wait. My mother-in-law has one, so with all the family, we bring flowers to that grave from Stanley Puczynski, and and that's very special. And I think that makes it. Sometimes we remember a little bit faster than other parts of the country that the United States liberated us. Yeah.
I was there last year and it made an incredible impression. I was really impressed. And they paid the ultimate price, so
They
we
did.
never forget.
But that's also very interesting if you see that the scope of the United States is a little bit changing also to, for instance, Latin America or to China, Asia.
China.
That's because, of course, that all the people who have family in Europe, have connections with Europe, that group is declining.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
have to really keep the ties close because we know that if you the demographic movements of the United States will make that we have to make more efforts to keep our ties as close as they are now, and that's very important.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Van Elden.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And good luck in your election campaign. We have some youngsters here to advise you, I think, with their American experiences. That brings me to the world-famous White House watchers. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2004, it was only me. I was alone. I felt lonesome. I went to New Hampshire. It was very cold in wintertime. It was the Kerry-Bush electoral fight, and with all the candidates from the Democratic Party. I think it was also John Edwards and Howard Dean. And so I went, of course, by plane to Boston, and then with the Greyhound to Manchester, New Hampshire, one of those few New Hampshire cities. And I thought, what is this? The Merrimack River was frozen. It was in Celsius, it was below 15 degrees. It was all over the place frozen. I came into my hotel room. It was not the best hotel in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I paid a lot of money for a hotel room because CNN, Fox, and all the national networks and foreign journalists were there with their cameras. Now, this is the bell from the Dutch National Parliament. So I came into my hotel room, and I put on the television, and there was a weather alert. Don't go in the streets. It's too cold. But if you are there alone, and it's 7 o'clock in the evening, and you are there not in a nice hotel, not so nice hotel, I thought, come on. I put my jacket on, and I walked to the city center of New Hampshire. 7 o'clock, so there was traffic in the main street, snow everywhere, and there was a lady tied to a lamppost, and she had a huge sign, I want to marry John Kerry. And I thought, well, this is very special. I want to marry John Kerry. So I introduced myself, and I said, I'm from the Netherlands. Oh, all the way from Europe. Yes, because your primary is for us also important. Who will become the next US president? Maybe Mr. Kerry. And it seems to me that you like him. I didn't dare to say love. You like him very much. Now, long story short, she said, yes, Mr. Kerry is also coming to this place tonight. If you see that restaurant with the neon lights, come in 1 hour and I introduce you to Mr. Kerry. And for me, it was incredible. So I walked into that restaurant. I talked with a somewhat older lady, and that was Theresa Heinz Kerry, his wife. I could talk a few minutes with Mr. Kerry, with a lot of cameras around him, but some volunteers. It was an unbelievable experience for me, that as a Dutchman, I could ask questions with live cameras. I could have asked very critical or nasty questions. This is real American democracy. So I thought, I must not do this, although I did it for Dutch media, but I need to bring people with me. And this year, so every 4 years, this year in February, we went with a group of especially young people, and we have a few of them here. You can recognize them because they have their red, white, and blue scarves. We call ourselves the White House Watchers. And I want to ask 1 or 2 questions per person. Because of keeping the distance in COVID times, I will ask first Ferry to come to the podium. Ferry, if you will sit here. I talked about New Hampshire. But even earlier, you were also in New Hampshire, but yep. Even earlier on the campaign trail, you were in Minnesota, in the city of Minneapolis, in the basketball arena for a Trump rally. When you walked into that stadium, Ferry, you have seen Mr. Trump on television during rallies in 2016. And what was your experience? What was your impression?
To be honest, I was a little bit mesmerized when I walked in the. We walked through a really big door. We were in the press area, which was on the basketball court, in the middle of the stadium, and a big door opened. And because we were late, everybody was already inside. I thought that we were in the wrong building. I thought a pop concert was going on. Everybody was dancing, singing. The wave was going on. Really excited. There was a guy walking with the T-shirt with Jesus is my savior, Trump is my president. So I had the feeling that I was in a completely different world. And then Trump showed up, started speaking, mesmerized everybody. He's a really good speaker. There's so much energy in the room.
Is it only about, let's say, populism? I think the president is proud to call himself a populist for the ordinary people to reach out. But is there more than only 2.5 hours?
Yeah,
talking.
Yeah, he is a populist, of course. He likes to throw one-liners like the "Where's Hunter?" and he knows how to make funny stories about people. The Sleepy Joe story, the Crooked Hillary. He's really creative with those things. But he also has a plan, and he really has a good story about his plans. And I think he also showed in the previous years. that he's also taking action upon it, lowering the tax. He wants to stop the war. So I think it's not just populism, but there's also context.
Do you think that the Dutch are a bit biased? That in media that we tend to criticize always Mr. Trump in Dutch media.
Yeah,
If
I
you
think so.
look at the talk shows in the Netherlands, is that true, or what is your opinion?
Yeah, I think that's true, of course. But in a way, he also makes it a little bit this way for himself, because he speaks really aggressive, of course, not using very kind words usually. So he also asks a little bit for it. And I think he also takes advantage of it by saying fake media, so he creates his own bubble. So he's really smart in doing that.
Yeah. So, Mr. Trump is not afraid.
No,
Yeah?
he's not.
So
no.
he's a tough politician. Okay, Ferry, we have to keep it short.
That's it already?
Yes, this is already your presentation on Mr. Trump. And Nicola. Nicola. When you were in your room at home here in the Netherlands before the trip, and you packed your suitcase, and you were thinking of, I'm going to New Hampshire with some people I don't know, White House watchers, a few you did know, of course. What did you think? What did you expect from that trip?
Well, I expected some craziness, of course, because you as a senior...
Because I'm a bit crazy?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, because you as senior
Okay,
White
thank
House
you.
watchers,
Thank you. Yeah.
and also, of course, my dad and the other dads of the
Yeah.
group told us about the craziness. But it was far more than we expected, because in Holland, it was not a big deal that the primary started already, because it was a few months before election.
Yeah.
But when we arrived, it was everywhere, and young people, old people, everybody was focusing on. When we were there were only Democratic candidates, so they were all focusing on the candidates, and it was everywhere in every town hall. Everybody was focusing on that, and it was everywhere.
So
and
if
it
you
was
compare
so
it with
much
the
more-
Netherlands, it's quite a difference.
Yeah, I cannot imagine people being with a shirt of, for example, Martijn, as you just spoke.
Martijn, it's
Walking around and canvassing for him, and that's what they do there. So, yeah, it was quite impressive.
So you admire the energy and the,
Yes,
and the volunteers,
enthusiasm.
by the way. Is that something we have in
Excuse
the
me?
Netherlands? All those volunteers knocking on doors and
No, we spoke to a few students as well who decided to spend weeks canvassing for candidates. And we were like, ooh, okay, that's something I probably wouldn't do. So, that was quite special.
yeah, and but I see it in your eyes that maybe if you were an American and you are in New Hampshire maybe in 4 years, that maybe for you that's also interesting to be a volunteer one of the campaigns for a few days.
I'm not sure, can we, as foreigners?
Yes, it's possible.
Yeah.
And then you will become an America expert.
That would be nice.
Because we now have a lot of
watch
them.
your back, Willem.
No problem. We need the youngsters, and I'm in favor of the White House watchers, of course. What made the most impression on you? Can you give us an example of all these visits you made? Is there something that comes to your mind that you think, wow, that was really very special?
I actually have two things. One of the first things is what made an impression was that we as foreigners coming there as tourists, I didn't expect
Political tourists. Huh?
political junkies.
Okay, yeah.
We call ourselves political junkies. But I didn't expect people are willing to talk with us actually about politics, because I knew that Americans are quite safe talking about politics. But people are actually willing to speak with us, and that was one of the things that made quite a good impression on me. And also we went to this really big event. Do you remember the arena?
In that stadium in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Yes, that was one of the things.
There you saw them all. The Democratic
all the
candidates.
Democratic candidates were there, and as Ferry mentioned before, it felt like we're going to a concert of Justin Bieber or something. There were sections for every Democratic candidate, and they were all wearing colors of their candidates. So, for example, we were in the Elizabeth Warren section.
By coincidence. Huh?
Yes, by coincidence.
You have to sit somewhere. Yeah.
So we were all wearing T-shirts and buttons, and we got the wristbands with the lights, and everybody was cheering and singing, and that was something I never saw before, and I think that's really special about U.S. Politics.
Okay, thank you, Nicola. Thank you for this.
So we'll be back in 4 years, right?
Okay, yes, let's do that. Thank you. And Betsy. Betsy, please take a seat. Betsy, it's not a secret that you, well, admire Bernie Sanders, and you got the chance as a European lady, Dutch lady, to be not only at a rally of Mr. Sanders in Rochester, New Hampshire, but you were sitting just behind him. How? So he was Mr. Sanders, and then hundreds of people, and you were sitting there. So
Yeah.
how did you arrange that? How did that come?
I think we got rewarded for our determination. We were really determined to see him speak that day. We tried the first venue, I remember, and it was freezing cold. It was probably -5 or -10 degrees. It was snowing.
Okay.
And we tried the first venue, and I screamed at him when he drove past me, like, Bernie Sanders! And he just drove past me. We couldn't get into the venue, so we
That was
rushed.
not so nice from him.
No, but it didn't change my feelings.
Okay.
So we rushed to another venue, a theater where he was also speaking, and I think we arrived 1.5 hours before, and we waited for 1.5 hours, like the real fans we are, in the snow, and then we finally got in, and 2 people from his campaign team, they approached us, and they asked if we wanted to be on stage with him, the 4 of us, Sophie, Nicola, and Mickey, my sister. And we told them, sorry, we're Europeans, we cannot vote, we're probably not supposed to be there. And they told us, no, it's fine, if you're fans, just hold up the signs and join him on stage. So we did, and then afterwards the crazy part began, because we were just flabbergasted that we were invited on stage. So in the car back to the hotel, we were discussing this. And then all of a sudden, Sophie, she was holding up her phone, she was like, guys, look at this. And she had a picture of Bernie Sanders' Instagram, and this guy has 5 or 6 million followers. And he had posted a picture with the 4 of us on his Instagram. And then we started reading the comments, and it was just Trump supporters commenting like, who are those fake girls? Who photoshopped those girls in? Who put those cardboard cutouts on stage? And we were really there. But it was really funny to me. It was a bit of a symbol of how the elections are going these days with social media, like all the fake news accusations that the Democrats have been facing. And now we were actually the subject of that. So that was pretty special to experience.
Yeah, and you as a Sanders expert, do you think the Sanders voters will vote today for Mr. Biden? What is your guess?
I hope so. I think one of the main points of Sanders' campaign was his strong hate for Trump. And I think that most people that are going to vote for Biden are just people that really don't want to see Trump in the Oval Office for 4 more years. So I'm hoping that people are going to vote for him. And I'm hoping it's going to be a president in the White House from now on that is able to unite people, that is able to emphasize people's common ground rather than underlining their differences. So I'm hoping he will get the votes.
So from a Sanders girl, you're now more a Biden girl or lady.
I wouldn't say that.
No. The nuances are important. So thank you, Betsy.
You're welcome.
Interesting story. And Sophie, will you step forward? Sophie, we talked with Ferry about, Mr. Trump, with Nicola about New Hampshire more in general, with Betsy about Bernie Sanders. And you visited with your colleagues, the White House watchers, also a Joe Biden town hall. You were in a ballroom in a hotel.
Yeah.
Near the beach. There is a beach
Yeah.
in New Hampshire also. And so in that ballroom, suddenly there was Mr. Biden. What was your impression of Mr. Biden?
Yeah, well, that man made quite an impression on me. I remember me making that morning quite a statement that I really wanted to go to see him, because whenever do you have a chance to meet such a powerful man as Joe Biden? And I remember the dads were arranging this because we had a flight that afternoon, and they thought we weren't able to make it. And you were with me. You really wanted to see him.
I was also
as well.
there.
Yeah, but you really wanted to
By
see him as well.
coincidence.
Because I was quite pushing it. I really want to see him, and I'm so happy we did that, because, he was such an impressive, calm, and experienced man, and he was standing there. And when we were there, I really realized that this man really carried about the soul of the nation, like he's saying himself the whole time, but also that he really carried for the people that are actually voting. And he really made that quite, he really showed that by making small conversations with all the people that are actually voting for him. And if you compare that, for instance, like Betsy was saying, to Bernie Sanders, who was more quite angry man just walking and not wanted to have a conversation with any of us.
Sorry, Betsy.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Betsy.
Yeah.
Joe Biden actually did. And especially at the end of the rally, we were, as a young White House watcher, which we were like stepping forward to him and trying to make conversation. And he noticed us, he saw the scarves, and he was like, oh, where are you coming from? And we were mentioning that we came all the way from the Netherlands. And even though he knew that we weren't able to vote for him, he actually took a moment to talk to us. And he did that with all the people that were standing there. And that was when I realized that he really wanted to, you know, save the country. And really, like you were saying before, he really cares about
That
his
is
voters.
his strength.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, even Republicans,
Yeah.
his opponents,
Yeah.
they say, well, Mr. Biden, on a personal scale, he's
Yeah, he's amazing. He actually hugged us and took a picture.
Yeah.
And hello, we hugged the next president of the United
But
States.
to be honest, it was in New Hampshire a lousy campaign because he lost and lost and lost.
Yeah,
eh?
yeah,
He
that's
was
true.
He was in fifth place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we learn something? I asked the question also to some others here, the White House watchers, but is there something for you in that you think, well, this is really what we can learn here in the Netherlands from?
Well, I think it's so impressive that what Nicola was saying as well, young people are actually giving up their spare time in order to, and their weekends and everything, in order to get people on their side for their candidate. And that is so impressive. They're wearing t-shirts and they're like totally freaking out about their candidates. And you can't imagine that here, you know, you can't imagine us standing inside of Nieuwsport or Tweede Kamer, like getting people to vote for their candidate. And the passion there and the political preference of all those people there and the passion they have for it, it's so important. And of course, America is one of the biggest countries in the world, so it is really important who is going to be the next president there. But yeah, I think I don't see us doing that here. It's not the.
But imagine if you were an American, or if you are an American.
Yeah.
Do you think that you would be a volunteer for one of the
Yeah, I
candidates?
actually think I would be that. Yeah.
Did your New Hampshire experience change that?
Well, I think when you're there, even though you're not interested in politics at all, you're becoming a political junkie when you're there, because politics are everywhere, and you're like absorbing it everywhere. There are like these signs everywhere. People are wearing shirts, billboards. You can't get rid of it. So yeah, if I was living there, I probably would doing a campaign or something like that for one of the candidates as well.
Okay, this is what American campaigns are doing with Dutch
you're
people.
really getting interested in American politics.
So, okay, this and so you will be back in New Hampshire in 4 years?
Yeah, for sure.
Or one of the other places, Iowa, or you name it? Okay.
No, New Hampshire, because I think New Hampshire is such a small town, and you're like really able to travel through the whole town, following all the candidates. And because it's so much on the beginning, you're like really able to have a conversation with the candidates. Because if you were in Texas or California or whatever,
Yeah, the distances are different.
yeah,
of course.
and
of
we
course.
wouldn't have hugged Joe Biden. So
You're really,
I'm really
you
happy
see it
that we
here.
did that.
Yeah. Well, Sophie, thank you. White House Watchers, thank you for your enthusiasm and support and all the lessons you learned and what you're sharing with us and the audience at home. So thank you, Sophie, and
Best
all
trip
the others.
ever.
Best of ever. Yeah. Steve, we are warmed up now. And will you do the second part of the quiz? Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you, Willem. And thank you very much to all the White House Watchers group that are here. It's nice to be in a room full of political junkies. You remind me very much of me several decades ago. Volunteered on a statewide Senate campaign. I was out there on the weekend handing out bumper stickers and doing all those things. So I certainly understand, and I love the scarves, the football supporter type scarves. Those are fantastic. I love those things. All right, so the code for the second quiz is 1405680. This one's going to be a little tougher. Now, I have been asked to remind the folks who finished on the top 10 of the leaderboard on the first quiz to send an email to
Piet
ircthehague
is a technician in The Hague. Can you hear
at
me? Can you just give me a thumbs up?
state.gov, because we have some prizes that we're going to try to get out to the folks who end up on the leaderboard. So there's still everything to play for in the second quiz.
Do you hear him?
Scores are wiped clean. We're starting from 0. All right. Looks like just about everybody in the room has entered the code, so let's get started with question 1. All right. Number 1. What is the term of office of a U.S. Senator? We did the President, we did the House of Representatives, now it's time for the Senators. Is it 2
Hi,
years,
this is The Hague. Can
4
you hear
years, 6 years, or 8 years?
us? Hello, Mr. Hoekstra. Can you hear us?
And it is
Okay,
6
perfect.
years.
I'll go off the line.
31
Okay, I'll go off the line and I'll
players
give you
got
the
it
sound
that
from the
time.
room.
Fantastic. So let's move to
About 5
question
minutes.
2. And it's going to be no surprise.
You're on in
If you
about
paid
5
attention in
minutes.
the first round, how many of the 100 Senate seats are up for election in any given election year? Is it 1/3 of the 100, 1/2, 3/4, or all of them? And I'll give you a hint. The House of Representatives was all of them, so maybe that's not it. It's 1/3. It's 1/3. We had 38 people get that one right. In fact, the Senate terms are actually staggered, being 6-year terms, so that in every 2-year cycle, 1/3 of the 100 Senate seats are up for election in any year. All right, let's go to number 3. Who was the only president to win the Electoral College vote by a unanimous vote? Was it George Washington, Ronald Reagan, Franklin Roosevelt, or James Monroe? All right, 36 people knew that it was George Washington. The 8 people who guessed James Monroe, you were really close. He only lost 1 Electoral College vote. And that's because there was one elector who was bound and determined for George Washington to be the only president who ever won a unanimous vote in the Electoral College. And so he voted for the other candidate just to be sure that Washington would be that only one. So Monroe was very close. Let's go to the next question. Who traditionally administers the oath of office? Is it the Secretary of State, the Vice President, a family member, or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? I see some faces in the audience like they're really thinking hard, and it is the Chief Justice. 38 got it right, so yeah, maybe this isn't as tough as I thought it was. All right, let's move to the next one. We'll have a leaderboard after this one. All right, what non-state gained the ability to vote for president with the ratification of the 23rd Amendment? Was it Guam, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, or the Virgin Islands? The answer is the District of Columbia. Looks like we stumped some people. All right, finally I got a good, tough question. So yeah, 19 folks knew that it was the District of Columbia. They are the only non-state in the entire United States of America that is allowed to vote for president, and they get 3 electoral votes, just like Maine and Alaska and other small states. All right, let's see the leaderboard. All right, E.T. has phoned home with a perfect 5,000 in this round. Ribbit, Kathy, Dr. Evil, oh my goodness, lasers on their heads. Frosty, Bill, Simba, Elsa, Sakura, and Heartstorm, okay. All right, so we've got 8 perfect scores so far. So let's move on to question 6. Presidents are now limited to 2 terms. Which president was elected to 4 terms? Was it Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or Theodore Roosevelt? Indeed, it was Franklin Roosevelt. 32 folks got that right. Didn't stump anybody there, or not too many people. All right, let's move to question 7. I think the Dutch interest in Roosevelt is pretty clear. Who was the youngest person to become president? The youngest person to become president, was it Bill Clinton, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, or John F. Kennedy? I knew this was going to stump people. It's Theodore Roosevelt. He was 42 years, 322 days old when he became president after the assassination of President McKinley. John F. Kennedy was the youngest person to be elected president. He was a little over 43 years of age when elected. So actually, Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest person to ever become president. A little bit of a trick question there. All right, let's move on to question 8. Who is the only person to serve as both president and vice president without being elected to either office? Millard Fillmore, Theodore Roosevelt, Gerald Ford, or Lyndon Johnson? It was Gerald Ford. 18 got it right. Gerald Ford was appointed by President Nixon after the resignation of Spiro Agnew. And then he became president when Nixon himself resigned shortly thereafter. So Gerald Ford only won the votes of his constituents in his House of Representatives district in Michigan. He became a representative in the House, and then he was appointed vice president and became president when the president resigned. So he only ever faced the voters in his own House district, which is amazing that he became president and no one questioned it. It was a simple constitutional transition. Let's move on to question 9. In what year were the presidential debates first televised? 1956, 1960, 1964, or 1968? The answer is 1960. All right, we're back on track. 25 people got that. Those were the Nixon-Kennedy debates. And those were the very first ones to appear on TV. And the takeaway from that was that Nixon was very nervous, very sweaty, and Kennedy was very calm and composed. And many people think that that actually turned the tide of the election in Kennedy's favor. All right, let's go to our last question. And remember, if you end up on the leaderboard after this one, you send that email and you get swag. Who was the first woman on either the Republican or Democratic ticket? Was it Geraldine Ferraro, Sarah Palin, Hillary Clinton, or Condoleezza Rice? The answer is Geraldine Ferraro. 20 people got that right. Good. So more people got it right than wrong. She was Walter Mondale's vice presidential candidate back in, I believe, 1980. And she was the first woman to appear on the ticket of a major party. In fact, Victoria Woodhull, this is a little-known fact. I got to leave you with this. Victoria Woodhull was the very first woman to run for president. She was the nominee of a small party in the 1870s, decades before the 19th Amendment had even been passed to extend the right of the vote to women in the United States. So it's an interesting concept that we had a female presidential candidate decades before women were even permitted legally to vote in the United States. All right, so let's take a look at the leaderboard and see who's going to be sending an email to IRC The Hague at state.gov to collect their swag. Yeah, E.T. is up there, 9,000. All right, so E.T., Sakura, Kathy, Jan, all with 9,000 points. Danny, Finnica, Mosa, Hank, Ribbit, and Nick. Everybody collects swag. If you're on the board, send that email, and we got a little bit of a prize for you. Thank you all very much for playing along. Hope you had fun through both rounds. I'll hand it back over to Willem, and we'll bring the ambassador into the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. We learned a lot. And wow, all these answers. I'm really impressed by all the knowledge. Yes, I will not really introduce the ambassador because we all know him, but I just want to say Ambassador Piet Hoekstra, born in Groningen, immigrated with his family to Michigan, member of the US National Congress from 1993 till 2011, founding chairman of the Congressional Caucus on the Netherlands, and I consider him, and I think a lot of people consider him, as the promoter of Dutch-American ties in the US Congress. So a great friend of the Netherlands. Since January 2018, Mr. Hoekstra is the US ambassador to the Netherlands. And Mr. Hoekstra is at this very moment in Michigan. Mr. Hoekstra, we are very happy to have you. Can you hear me?
I have a question.
Yes?
Willem, why did you not win the contest?
Oh, yeah. Well, I will do that next time. Mr. Ambassador, we all are curious. Did you already vote?
Actually, I was planning on voting today, but my I was mailed an absentee. I actually voted yesterday, and Diane voted today.
Okay, so your vote will be counted.
I expect it will be counted, yes.
Okay. And this election day, this November the 3rd, why is this for you personally such a special day?
Well, you got to remember that since 1992, through 2012, my name was on the ballot.
They voted for you.
And so
yeah.
It gets to be very personal. And in 2016, I was very involved in the campaign of the president. And then in 2020, now I'm in a nonpartisan position. It's kind of amazing. I'm appointed by the president, but I cannot do anything to advocate for either candidate in this election.
Yeah, I can imagine that this is your position now. And yeah, maybe you can tell us, what's the atmosphere now in Michigan? Do you see long lines of people waiting for the polling place? And what's your experience today?
Well, number one, the first thing that people look at on election day is what's the weather like?
Yeah.
In Holland, Michigan today, it is wel 13 graden.
Okay, well.
So it's a very comfortable day. Blue sky, sunshine, so you put this across the state of Michigan and it will help drive to be even a bigger turnout. We expect a lot of voters today.
Okay, so even also in Michigan, a record of voters you expect?
Yeah, I think we'll have more voters than we've ever had before. Michigan is recognized as a swing state. I talked to one of my former colleagues this morning. He's still on the ballot. He was out this morning at 7 o'clock holding up signs at a very busy intersection with some of his supporters. Okay. Vote for Fred, vote for Fred. It's amazing what we will do for votes here.
Okay. And let me put it this way. What do the latest polls say about who is winning in swing state Michigan?
The polls have been consistent, for the last 3-4 months. All of the polls, except I think one, have always had Joe Biden ahead by 6, 8, 10 points. the interesting thing is the one poll that has had the president ahead is the same polling organization that in 2016 was one of the few to actually call the state correctly, Trafalgar, the Trafalgar Company. So we'll see.
And are people concerned that their postal ballots are counted in the right way? Because we have that in the news here also in the Netherlands. There are maybe some problems. What do you think? Or what do people say about this in your state?
I think people in Michigan are fairly comfortable with the voting process. We haven't, Willem, we have not changed our procedures for voting from this election to what we would have experienced 4 years ago, 8 years ago. It is the same procedure. We're probably just seeing more people using absentee than what we've seen before, but the system we're using is the same as what we've used before. I think people have a high degree of confidence that there's integrity here in the system for the state of Michigan.
Okay, well, thank you. And it's now 9:15 in the evening in the Netherlands. When do you expect we will know the first results? Any
I
idea?
expect that the national media really doesn't start projecting results or picking states. I think they've got an agreement to wait until 11 o'clock at night.
Okay.
Because that's when the polls close on the West Coast. They don't want to, give a clear indication as to who's going to be winning or losing in the presidential race, because it may or may not discourage or encourage voters from voting in our western states. So they've agreed to wait. So I expect that at 11 o'clock you'll start seeing them. But, it's interesting. Again, I'm talking to my friends who are still on the ballot. They have ways to find out. Tonight I will be with Congressman Huizinga. He will have people at the different places where they're counting ballots. And so he'll be calling in, or they'll be calling into Bill's headquarters.
Okay.
And probably about 9:15, we'll start hearing some numbers about, okay, hey, Pete, in these key precincts in Holland, Michigan, Bill will say, hey, I'm running stronger than I ran 2 years ago. I'm running stronger than what I ran 4 years ago. Then he'll tell us how Trump is doing, which will begin to give us some insights. I know that national media is already talking about some of the results that they're seeing coming out of Florida. Not the voting results, but, they're doing exit polling. So they kind of have an idea as to who may be winning. Like, everybody's going to be watching what's happening in Miami. This is where the Democrats traditionally have to roll up a huge majority so that when outstate Florida, as we call it, as those votes start coming in, they can, they have to make up the gap that you see in Miami-Dade. And the results right now are saying Miami-Dade actually is very, very close. That's not good for the Democrats.
No, that's a surprise.
And the turnout's not that high. And there are those that are saying, based on their exit polling, the president is getting 45% of the African-American male vote.
That's a lot.
If that actually proved true and across the country, or at least through the East Coast, and if that trend continued into the Midwest, I think you'd be one of the first to say, if that actually happens, if Trump actually gets 35 to 45% of the African American male vote, he's going to be the president. If again, but all of this is preliminary right now, so let's wait to see what happens with the votes.
I think we have to wait in the Netherlands till, let's say, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then we know a little bit more. But we will stay up at night and watch, the conversations on television.
Well, I think I do my last interview with the Dutch. I think I do, what is it, Goedemorgen?
Ja, Goedemorgen Nederland.
I'm doing them at, Goedemorgen Nederlands, I think, or Nederland. I do them at 4 o'clock Michigan time, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that at 4 o'clock in the morning we will yet have a winner.
Okay. Okay, I was there in the same program this morning, so you see my eyes, a bit tired. And but okay, for you it's also then 4 o'clock in the night. So we have the same, basically we have the same experience. Ambassador, thank you so much. You're now in Holland, Michigan, I assume, or in Zeeland, Michigan, Holland?
Ik ben in Holland. I'm in Holland, Michigan. Yes.
The best place for a U.S. ambassador in the Netherlands to be in Holland, Michigan. Thank you so much. Have a pleasant day.
And thank you for joining the embassy.
Thank you.
For this program. You're an absolute great host. There's a future in this for you.
Well, I'm not that young anymore. We will have some White House watchers helping me. They're sitting in the audience. We have a limited capacity, of course. But thank you for the advice. I will keep it in mind. Thank you and have a great day.
All right.
A great political day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Celebrating democracy.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Ambassador.
Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's time to wrap it up. And you know, I'm not a journalist, but it's a bit vague. When are you a journalist? If you are a commentator, you are working in journalism, in the media world. And I think the great thing is that if you talk about US politics, and the embassy is a partner in this event, I think it's fantastic that you have all these differences of opinions. If you talk about the United States, even if the embassy is a partner, some people can be critical about the US, some people can defend the United States, open mind. Let's be honest, such an event will not be organized if you have it about Chinese politics or Russian politics by the Chinese embassy or the Russian embassy. And I think, although the Dutch can be rather critical, especially about this President Trump, keep that in mind. Our experiences on the campaign trail, we talked about this with the White House watchers, and I think it was very interesting, and Gijs and all the others, all your insights, different backgrounds, and sharing all kinds of reflections. That's the great thing about democracy. And it suddenly comes to my mind, when I visited Washington for the last time, I always go to the White House, just to see the White House. Yeah, come on, it's the White House. And there is a protester with a huge sign in his hands, and I think he is always there. And he had the F word on it, the F word. You know what it is. I hope you don't know what it is, but I assume you know what it is. And the name of the president, this president. So I talked with that guy, and I said, well, you're not very positive. Is that not a real insult, what you have on your sign? And he said, sir, this is the United States of America. Freedom of speech, freedom of your thought. You can say what you want. Well, you may not be violent, of course. But this is our democracy. We're outspoken, and this is possible. Only a few yards from the White House. So this is just one example. And another example is, of course, that during those town halls, I mentioned it already, and some of you did it also, that you could ask all the questions, even as Dutch visitors, when Fox had live coverage, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, they were all there. Come on, a Joe Biden town hall in New Hampshire. All the cameras were there. And you could have asked a very nasty, negative question. So that is, I think, also the heart of democracy. And my last remarks about the possibility that Mr. Trump is re-elected or Mr. Biden. We put them in perspective this night. Big differences, but there are always similarities between presidencies. Because there is a reality check. Of course, Mr. Biden is someone with a lot of charm. I said he's putting his arm on your shoulder, and he's outgoing in the sense that even his political opponents will work with him. In the past, he had a reputation for this. But keep in mind, if you talk about foreign policy, also this Mr. Biden, if he becomes president, will be tough on China. Very tough on China. There is a consensus between Republicans and Democrats. He will also be tough on NATO. Maybe in a different way than Mr. Trump. Mr. Biden will also put pressure on European allies. Come on, pay your money. Why only, for the most part, the American taxpayers? Come on, contribute. Maybe with a big smile, but in essence, a lot is the same. Trade talks. Europeans are complaining about trade barriers and all, well, the problems there were in the last 4 years. Mr. Biden will maybe open trade talks with Europe, but also he will definitely look very, very much to the interest of the American middle class. A lot of Americans are middle class, lower middle class, middle class, upper middle class. And especially now with, like in the Netherlands and elsewhere, a lot of problems in society. If Mr. Biden becomes president, it will also be America first. Maybe a lighter version, but he also has his Buy American Products policy. Yeah? So, of course, there are always differences, but don't exaggerate. There will also be similarities. But what will be, I hope forever, is the relationship between the Netherlands and the United States and other democracies, because from all the political systems, I think I speak on also your behalf that democracy is what we all want to keep, and we have to fight for this and celebrate election days. And then if we see that there is such a huge, huge turnout, that means also that people are committed. Each vote counts. So thank you for listening to us, to watching us, for you being here. In 4 years, COVID-free, then we have hundreds of people here in Nieuwsport. In 2024, we have popcorn, jazz music. Well, you will not believe it, that this will be a US town hall with a lot of noise. Now we only have 22 people, and a lot of people who have viewed this, of course. So that's a promise for 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the end of the program. I want to thank our technical staff, our organizers from the embassy, all of you. We will have tomorrow morning, if you check Facebook or nieuwsport.nl, the website, you can have a link for free, of course, and then you can watch our results event. We have a lot of media who will be here or connected to us and other organizations in the Netherlands. It starts already at 6 o'clock, from 6 to 10, and then you get even more input, and especially our political junkies. I see it in your eyes. More. Okay, we will see you tomorrow morning. Ladies and gentlemen, bye-bye. Greetings from The Hague. See you.